Ensure you have photos to use and Procreate downloaded before completing this tutorial. Open Procreate app. Now, tap the plus button for New Canvas. Select a canvas size. I use this square canvas as the example here. Using the new canvas, you will notice there are a few things. Once it opens, you can pinch in and out to zoom in and out on the canvas itself. Now tap the two square icon. This is the Layers palette. Tap on Background Color to select that as the current active layer. When you tap it, it'll bring up the color wheel, which is the far right circle. You can then drag or touch to select a color. This will select a color for the background layer. Very useful in lots of artwork creation, whether standard digital art or photomanipulation. You can create new layers by hitting the plus button on the Layers palette. Then hit the wrench icon. Go to Add. Tap Insert a Photo. All photos. This will show your saved photos in your photos gallery. Select one of these photos to use. I prefer to start with the background more often. Once it's there, the arrow to select for transforming the selection. When it's on arrow, this is the transform tool. You can use an Apple Pencil or your fingers to pinch and zoom and change the size of this. Anything outside the borders gets clipped and is disappeared, deleted. But you can bring the same photo back in to start all over. See how it's on its own layer. Add another layer by hitting the plus button. Now you can go back to the wrench, Add a photo. And here you select another photo. Here I'm going to select a cat. Then we can change the canvas size by zooming in and out by pinching our fingers. You can use the selection tool, the S. I use 3-finger tap here. Select an area. Using the rectangle selection tool, slowly swipe down your 3 fingers on the physical screen. This menu comes up. Tap, Cut. That will delete the area that's been selected. You can also use the freehand tool under the selection tool to use your Apple Pencil or finger to select a specific area. You can also use the 3-finger swipe down. Swipe your 3 fingers down on the screen and then select Cut. You can also use Automatic. This adjusts to different thresholds. When you tap it, you can pull your finger or the Apple Pencil to the right or left to select the selection threshold. This is how much is selected, based on how similar colors are. Adjust this to base it on how many similar colors you want to select. It keeps selecting too much, so I'm pulling the threshold down towards the left without removing my pen from the screen to select less. I finally just selected the white on the outer edge. I 3-finger swiped down and selected Cut. This deleted that whole area, but as you see, there's some rough edges. Over on the right upper left is the eraser. You can adjust the size and opacity of the eraser. The top selection bar there on the far left is the size of the brush. The bottom one is how opaque it is. I recommend the eraser on maximum opacity most of the time. This eraser is a little bit smaller, but it's based on a larger brush, so it erases large areas. It's a soft airbrush eraser, so the edges are a bit soft. Swipe the eraser along the screen just as you would with a paintbrush tool to erase what you're touching with the eraser brush. Once again, I'm changing the threshold by dragging the pen along the screen after tapping an area to adjust the selection threshold. I can keep adjusting it and trying again until it gets the colors I want in the page, not everything. 2-finger tap on the screen quickly to undo the last thing you did. 3-finger tap on the screen quickly to redo it. As you can see, I'm using different selection methods. Now I zoom in a bit. Using freehand, I use my Apple Pencil to carefully go in and select things. However, I realized it deleted part of the cat's paws. so I 2-finger tap to undo. Then I zoom back in. It's alright to undo with 2-finger taps or 3-finger tap to redo and step forward. I carefully zoom in and draw a line along the edge. I can include little zigzaggedy bits to capture the edge of the fur. In Procreate, you can lift the pen up and just continue with the selection. It's a very good selection tool, better than most other digital art programs, which require you never lifting the pen off the screen, or it'll select the area. Carefully go around the edges, zooming in and out as you need. Pull the pen along the screen like you're drawing on a piece of paper. Select all round in a circle, back to the start point. Then, it'll select that area. You can 3-finger tap or select an eraser to erase it. I use the eraser here by making it as large as possible and swiping over the selected area. Now I'm carefully selecting another area using the freehand selection tool. The freehand selection tool is able to get more precise with your hand than the automatic selection tool is if the colors are too similar between the figure and the background. If the background is very plain and a very different color from the figure, I recommend the automatic selection tool when you're doing photo manipulations. This can be used as well with artwork you have created, photographed, imported, or painted digitally in the program. These tips are also useful for digital art in general. Continue to carefully select around objects in order to get everything more precise. If you take your time at this step, you'll have less correction to do later. So I advise you carefully select around the edges by hand using the freehand selection tool, as seen here, rather than making a mistake early on by over-selecting with the automatic selection or by under-selecting by using things like the rectangle tool. We can clean up the edges by switching to a slightly harder soft airbrush. Change the brush size to very, very small. Then you can zoom in closely. Using the eyedropper tool, which is the square between the two, or holding your finger on the screen, you can select a color from the artwork or the photo. You can then select a brush by tapping the brush palette. I have many downloaded brushes. You can get almost all of these for free by searching the Procreate brush forums, or use a default brush. Spectra is a default brush in Procreate 5.0. Changing the opacity and size of the brush, you can paint things in by painting directly onto it. I selected a different color here using the eyedropper tool. You can hold your finger on the screen or tap the square symbol between the two things that adjust the brushes on the left-hand side. This allows you to take colors directly from the photo or from the artwork in order to use to paint digitally. I'm selecting different colors and going back over with a very small version of the brush. Zooming back out, I'm looking at the overall image. I tap the arrow tool to transform. When it's on uniform, all the proportions will stay the same. I lower the cat down where I want it. I decide I'm going to bring another background element in, so I put it around here. I create a new layer. I hold onto it and pull it below physically, dropping it so that the layer goes below the cat layer. I look in my photos. All these photos are either artworks I made or public domain. I find this rock. I make it larger and rotate it around so it's underneath the cat. I'm now adjusting things. Once again, I want to focus only on this layer. I make the layer invisible by tapping the Layers palette and unchecking that layer. Just tap the checkmark box on the right side of the layer in the two squares one, the Layers palette. That'll make a layer invisible. Make sure you've tapped on the layer you want to actually work on, the one with the rock. I'm now using all the tips I already said to delete the edges. I zoom in really close with a softer eraser and I very carefully erase the edges that were not selected correctly with the automatic selection tool. Just take your time, however long it takes, and slowly do a good job. Now, switch over to the transform tool. Pull on the corners with your finger or an Apple Pencil to distort. You can also use freeform to warp and distort the image. You can also experiment with the warp option. This allows you to modify the entire photo section. Going back to the layers palette, tap on the cat layer, now the transform arrow, so you can move it to where you want on the rock, or whatever background element you're working on. Now create new layers by hitting the plus button on the layers palette. Switch back to the cat layer in order to select merge down with the layer below. This way the cat and rock are now on the same layer together. This allows us to work on the lighting for both the rock and the cat at the same time. I advise leaving the background layer as a separate layer below them, however. We're now going to move to the layer above, and we're going to set it to a different mode. Tap again and select clipping mask. This makes everything painted on this layer only paint over the area of the layer below it's clipped to. Now we're going to change the layer mode. Tap on the letter, which is normally an N. Scroll through the options that appear. Select multiply, which will show up as an M. Then do the same with the layer above, but this time select hard light. Tap on the name of the layer directly. This will bring up the option to change the name. Change the multiply layer to shadows. Switch this layer here to hard light mode, then change the name to lights. These are two very useful options to allow you to easily add shadows and lights. Multiply darkens colors and makes them a little dimmer, like shadows. Hard light makes lighter colors brighter and vibrant, like highlights are. As you can see, I'm using the color picker tool again to select things. Go to the brush tool, select a brush, change the size and opacity. On the clipping mask layers over top, paint in the highlights on the lights layer, and then paint in the shadows on the multiply or labeled shadows layer. You can select different colors from the background to work with, picking darker colors for the shadows, and lowering the opacity. A lower opacity will make the shadows less harsh and more real. Color over the cat and the rock to make them fit the lighting of the background sky. You want the lighting of the background and the figures in the photo to match each other. Think about where the light would hit based on the lighting in the background. This cat is more backlit, so most of its body will now be more in shadow. The bright colors in the sky, the yellows, golds, and oranges, will be on the upper surfaces and around the rim edges of the cat. This is different for each artwork you do. Do more studying and more practice. Try to make the lighting match. I advise looking up other art tutorials and also just experimenting as well. Feel free as well to pause this video, take written notes, and replay sections of this video as you need it in order to learn more easily and in order to retain what you learn. I also advise you pause the video and try out the tips before continuing the video. This is a better way of learning than just trying to work at the same speed that I'm going. At any time, feel free to tap the Layers palette, the two squares, to check that you're on the correct layer for what you're currently doing. As you go along, work up to the darker shadows based on the lighting scheme that you're working in, and work up on the highlight layer, the lights layer, to the brightest lights. I advise you start more gently and pale and work your way up to the darker tones. It's easier to correct mistakes this way. You can also use the blur or smudge tool to help you smudge out some of the things. You can change which type of brush the blur tool is, and you can change what type of brush the eraser tool is as well. You can always change the size and opacity of brushes, smudge tools, and erasers. You can also tap and hold a different tool to switch to that tool quickly and also switch to the brush you just used. That's an interesting shortcut tool. Keep going, zooming in and out as needed. Whenever you feel comfortable to work at a smaller size, I advise you use a larger, less opaque brush to do larger areas in roughly. But I think you should zoom in when you're using more small detailed brushes and higher opacity. That way you can get the fine details and edges much more accurately, more easily. You can pinch, zoom, and rotate with your fingers to make the canvas on an angle and size that's easier for your hands and wrists. On larger screens and surfaces, try to use your whole arm and elbow. But I find I more often just use my wrist, which is perfectly fine. Try to loosen the grip on the pencil, Apple Pencil, in order to prevent wrist strain. If you're pushing too hard or too intensely gripping your pen, this can be harmful to your screen surface and also harmful to your wrist. I also advise you look into getting a screen protector for the iPad Pro so that you can make it more of a paper-like surface and/or also simply protect the screen from scratches if you're using the Apple Pencil and painting a lot digitally. Take your time, zooming in and out, switching between layers, switching opacity and size of paintbrush, and switching everything you're doing until you're happy with the results. Be willing to keep going until you're happy with it. Paint in fuzzy outer edges, use the blur tool maybe to smudge a bit if the outline looks too sharp from your previous selecting and deleting. Just go over the entire edge to make a brighter edge, depending on the lighting you're working with. Try to make everything match the lighting of the background, like I said. Remember to take your time and also to have fun. I advise you do additional research on how to use Procreate and do photo manipulation. There are many other useful tools in here and other things you can do. I'm simply not including because this is such a basic tutorial. One great tool that I didn't include here is the liquefy tool. There's also other ways of doing this and ways of using things like blurs. Now here I'm going to show you how to save. Tap the gallery button. This ensures that the entire file you just created gets saved. This is how you can select different files you created as well as create new ones. Tap on the file again to open it again. Tap on the wrench icon. Go to Share. Now select the type. I advise PNG because it will be higher quality. JPEG if you're exporting it somewhere that needs lower quality images. Tap Save Image on the option menu that pops up. Now you can also export the video. Procreate automatically time lapses. You can select the video length, which will export to your photos. You do need to go to the options in the main menu to select how the video is recorded for Procreate, which I will not include in this tutorial as I feel it's already long enough. This is how you can save and export. I hope you continue to learn and grow as an artist in Procreate. Here are the two videos, or rather the final image and the video I saved. Here's a view of some of the time lapse that was recorded while I was doing a screen recording of this tutorial video. As you can see, the recording will be only every action taken in Procreate itself and not the whole screen. Whereas this video itself is recorded using the screen record function on the iPad Pro. I'll have more tutorials and additional videos on various things coming out soon. I do hope you subscribe, turn on that notification bell, and enjoy my future content. I hope you all have a great day. Goodbye!